information I have is that the injury that caused the death of Mr. Becker was the result of a gunshot wound. And the actual gunshot struck Mr. Becker in the back on the right side. We are continuing to investigate the incident with interviews. We've also sent a number of items to the Montana State Crime Lab for analysis, and we're awaiting the analysis of those items. So we are particularly interested in talking to anybody who was at the residence or on the property before this incident occurred. And what we're interested in is the presence of some items that were located in the house. We'd like to see if those items were present and their location prior to this incident, and or if there are items that are there at the residence that weren't there previously, or mainly the location of some items in the residence. So we would encourage anybody to call us who was at the property or in the residence prior to this incident.
What do you mean items now?
Well, we just like to see, there's some items in the house that were potentially moved, and we'd like to see if someone could tell us if those items were in fact in the house, or if they're moved, or maybe they're even at the location where they were previous to this incident. We're just interested in the location of some things that were in the house.
What things?
I can't really comment on those things. There's just some items moved in the residence, or potentially moved. We can't even say that. We just want to make sure that the scene that we found is either the way it was beforehand, or if there were items that were moved, we'd like to know. So if anybody was in the residence or at the property, we'd like to talk to them. And the number to call is 782-7336 for Crime Stoppers, or you can call our dispatch center at 497-1120.
Sheriff, can you tell us if you guys recovered a projectile, bullets, or shot, or anything?
No, I can't comment on the projectile or the actual firearm at this time.
Where was the gun found in the house?
I can't comment on whether or not the weapon was actually recovered or not.
Did the scene resemble a robbery attempt?
Not necessarily, no. I don't think we could rule that out at this point, but we don't believe there was robbery involved.
What was the exact cause of death?
The gunshot was the cause of death.
Was it kill shot? Did he bleed out?
That's what I can't tell you that. That's what the gunshot was, the injury that ultimately caused Mr. Becker's death.
When do you guys think the fella, the time of death was?
Well, it was reported to us on that Sunday. We believe it was at least a day prior to that, at least one day prior to that.
You can't tell us if there were any injuries that didn't cause his death.
No, I can't comment on any additional
Okay.
injuries.
So you believe he was shot in the back?
Yes.
Inside the residence? Do you think he was moved or anything like that? Or
We don't believe he was moved, no.
maybe he was killed in his What can you tell us about the residence? Was this like a home, a cabin, a garage?
I don't know if I can comment on that. It's the residence where this guy lived. What what our focus is the items that we've sent to the Montana State Crime Lab. We're going to wait until they're analyzed and see what we're able to determine from that analysis. And also, we'd like anybody who was at the property, even if it doesn't seem like it's a big deal to that particular person or anybody who's been at the property or in the residence, we'd like them to come forward so we could speak to them about whether or not the scene or the interior of the residence was the way we found it, or if there's some items that may have been out of place.
And the residence was pretty isolated, right? Could you see other residences from it?
No, the residence itself is isolated in considerable distance from any other residences.
Did the victim own the property?
It's very vague for us.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Becker was the owner of the property.
Has his family been contacted yet?
Yes, we have been in contact with his family.
Any motive?
Not that I can comment on, no.
Is the gun being analyzed?
I can't comment on the weapon that was involved. We have sent some items to include some firearms that were found on the property to the lab, and those are being analyzed.
Okay.
Any suspects?
Not going to comment on suspects or persons of interest either.
Do you still encourage people to call Crime Stoppers?
Oh, absolutely. If anybody has any information at all, we'd be interested in talking to them about this incident. Anybody who has knowledge of Mr. Becker, even if they hadn't been to the property and his habits or anybody he may have been in contact with just prior to this, we'd love to speak to those folks. So if they contact us, we'd appreciate it.
What did Mr. Becker do? What did he work somewhere? Do we know where he worked?
You know, I don't believe he worked in any particular place. I think that's where he owned that property and remained there most of the time. So I can't comment on whether he had another job or anything like that.
Is he a longtime resident, or was he somebody that just kind of lived
No,
there?
as far as I know, he was a longtime resident of Silverboe County.
Was he known by police? Have he had police? record?
Not to my knowledge, no. He didn't have any contact with us criminal-wise.
The gunshot wound to the back, was that the only wound he sustained?
I'm not going to comment on that. The fatal injury was the result of a gunshot wound.
Pistol, rifle, shotgun?
Can't comment.
So it was a citizen or family friend maybe who called about finding the body in the house?
You could safe to say it was a male who was a friend of Mr. Becker's who contacted us.
Was there stolen property found at his residence?
No,
No stolen property found at the residence?
not that I'm aware of, no.
How confident are you all that you'll make an arrest in this case?
Well, any kind of death investigation or homicide investigation takes a long time, and it's not necessarily the goal of any death investigations, not to get it done quickly, it's to get it done thoroughly. So we're going to continue to investigate and try to recreate the scene at the residence as best we can and derive what we can from that, as well as what's been analyzed at the crime lab. And it's possible we may have to send some additional items to the crime lab for analysis. So these things take a long time. Personally, I've been involved in one that took 8 years from start to finish, and we don't worry about speed as much as we worry about being thorough.
Are these items being tested for DNA?
You don't really want to comment on what exactly they're being tested for, but there's a number of items that are being analyzed and will be analyzed at the crime lab.
I know you can't tell us what the items are, but what kind of items?
Can't comment on them.
Did Becker have like any health history or any serious illness?
I don't know. I couldn't comment on his health history.
But just to be clear, you guys want to get out a message of that, you want to know if items in the house had been moved?
Yeah, well,
That's-
we documented the scene through photography and video. So what we'd like to do is have anybody who'd been in the residence, within a week or two or even a month before the incident, to see if these items that were potentially moved were in that position when they were there, or if they're actually, we don't know whether there's any relevance to the location of these items or not, but we'd like to try and reconstruct the scene and put it back the way it was as best we can. And that's what we do with every investigation. It certainly is not unique in that fashion.
And I guess if somebody were to know this, that's our resident, like, what's an item, what are some examples of things, so somebody may say,
I
"Oh,
couldn't, we would probably, if they were to come forward, we would ask them about the specific items and talk to them about it at this point, but I don't believe that's something that we'll release at this time.
Any continued threat to the community?
Don't believe so. We believe this is an isolated incident. No reason to believe there's any danger to other persons at this time.
Did it all seem as though someone had broken in, or did it seem that they were invited?
No, there wasn't any signs of forced entry that we were able to determine.
Have you talked to his maybe neighbors about the incident?
We've talked to a number of people, but like I said, the residence itself is fairly isolated, so it's not like there's somebody next door we could talk to. So we've talked to a number of persons, and we would like to continue to talk to people who, whether or not they were at the property is not something we're concerned about. If there's obviously, if there are people who were there, we'd like to talk to them. But if anybody has any knowledge of Mr. Becker, who he may have been in communication with just prior to this, we'd like to talk to them as well.
Any vehicles found at the site?
I don't know about that. We're not looking for any particular vehicle at this time.